Interstate 25, a major north-south interstate in the western United States, stretching over 1,000 miles from the sun-scorched deserts of Las Cruces to the high plains gateway of Buffalo, Wyoming. Interstate 25 is far more than just a line on the map. It is the lifeblood of the American Mountain West, also known as the Pan-American Freeway. It shadows the historic footsteps of the Santa Fe Trail and El Camino Real, carving a path directly alongside the jagged peaks of the Rocky Mountain Front Range. Whether you're navigating the high-stakes mousetrap in Denver, braving the notorious winter blizzards of Raton Pass at over 7,800 feet, or crossing Colorado's brand new world record wildlife overpass, I-25 offers a journey defined by extreme geography and rapid urban growth. Now, some who use this roadway regularly may hate the traffic, especially in the Denver area, but the scenery is hard to deny. So in this video, we're going to be hitting the asphalt to explore the hazards, the history, the scenery, and all the other things that you can expect when driving along this corridor, which is one of the fastest growing in the United States. Let's go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe if you love this type of content, and let's get into Interstate 25. All right, Interstate 25 begins in Las Cruces, New Mexico. Coming off I-10 westbound, which is actually traveling in a more northbound direction, you'll see overhead signage for I-25 immediately after entering the Las Cruces city limits. Las Cruces and Albuquerque appear overhead, while Las Cruces also appears for I-10 west, along with Mesilla and Deming. US 85 also exits with I-25 and is concurrent with I-25 for its entirety through New Mexico, despite being unsigned. Las Cruces is New Mexico's second largest city with a population of over 100,000. We're at 4 lanes, 65 miles per hour, and the next 3 exits will take you to various points within Las Cruces. Now we're in the desert southwest, so the scenery looks just like you probably are imagining. Dry desert shrubs with mountains in the distance. On I-25, if you look to your left, you will almost always see mountains. And that's one of the reasons why I call Interstate 25 the Mountain Freeway. The mountains are always visible. Signage shows the distance to Albuquerque, but don't worry, we have a few towns along the way to break up the monotony. Exiting the Las Cruces area, the speed limit increases to 75. To the east of us is White Sands National Park, as well as the missile range of the same name. Now, I haven't been there yet myself, but it's definitely on the list of national parks to visit. The US 70 exit back in Las Cruces will get you there. The next sizable town is Truth or Consequences. Yes, that's the actual name of the city, Truth or Consequences. Apparently, it used to be called Hot Springs, but changed its name to Truth or Consequences after a quiz show in 1950, where the host announced he would air his show from the first city that agreed to change its name to Truth or Consequences. So here we are today. The hot springs still remain, and I recently took a little morning tour around the town. There was also a movie from the 1990s starring old Kiefer Sutherland, our main man from the TV show 24, and that movie was named after the city. Road conditions out here vary, as some sections are in excellent condition, while others will test the shocks on your vehicle. Now we are continuing north with mountains if you look west, and the Rio Grande is not far from us to the east. We come across a few interesting features such as the Nogal Canyon, and the next city up is Socorro. In Socorro, the road suddenly gets smoother, and we've got some very modern looking overpasses here. I really do like how they paint these to blend in with the desert environment. US 60 joins for a bit after Socorro, and surprisingly, New Mexico actually signs it. After about an hour or more of desert driving, we approach Belén, which is Spanish for Bethlehem. This is your first sign that you are closing in on Albuquerque, as Belén is the southernmost city in the area. One interesting thing about I-25 in New Mexico is that many of the towns have an I-25 business loop to access them. Now, this is different from many other states where the underlying U.S. highway that the interstate replaced is often used for accessing local towns instead. So New Mexico shows no love for US 85. Belén has plenty of hotels and a Love's travel stop for those on a long journey. And after Belén is Los Lunas, the county seat of Valencia County and a fast-growing part of the metro area. From the interstate, you can see some of the freshly built subdivisions that dominate the landscape. We have a short break in the action until the interchange with Broadway Boulevard, which is where we get the third lane, and you can exit on this road to take the surface street north into downtown Albuquerque. After coming over the hill, the little Albuquerque skyline is visible in the distance. Don't blink too fast, or you might miss it. Since we are now in New Mexico's largest city, to no surprise, the traffic picks up and the road suddenly doesn't feel so lonely. Sunport Boulevard runs you east to the airport, and the University of New Mexico is also in the area. There's plenty to stop and check out in Albuquerque, including the old Route 66, which is known as Central Avenue through the town. There's Old Town Albuquerque, a little further to the west, which is where the city originally began. Then, of course, there are plenty of awesome Mexican restaurants scattered all over town. I had some El Patio de Albuquerque while I was there, and it definitely hit the spot. On the interchange side of things, the crown jewel of Albuquerque is the interchange with I-40 known as the Big I. Now, you know it's a pretty big deal when an interchange has its own special name. This complex stacked interchange was redesigned in the early 2000s after the original interchange from the 60s was overwhelmed and unable to handle modern traffic. Interstate 40 is signed for two places you've probably never heard of: Gallup and Santa Rosa. Just think of it as Santa Rosa is somewhere in eastern New Mexico, while Gallup is somewhere to the west. For us on I-25, we are headed towards Santa Fe. After the Big I-25 opens up to 8 lanes heading through the northern parts of the Albuquerque area. There is some construction here, lots of speeding drivers, and lane switching, so be alert. We drop back to 6 lanes, and at exit 242, that lane drops off and can take you to Bernalillo, or the large suburb of Rio Rancho. The speed limit jumps back to 75 and things quiet down once you enter the San Felipe Reservation. Between here and Santa Fe is more scenery that you've become accustomed to in New Mexico, along with small amounts of development dotting the landscape. Once we reach the Santa Fe area, you'll see signage for New Mexico 599, which is known as the Santa Fe Relief Route. Now, this loop highway was designed to divert truck traffic bound for Los Alamos around Santa Fe and is partially controlled access, but does have long-range plans to eliminate the remaining traffic lights to become a full-fledged freeway. From the interstate itself, you're not going to see much in Santa Fe. You'll have to hop off and drive into town to get an idea of how it actually looks. Santa Fe's downtown still maintains its historic Pueblo or Santa Fe style architecture, and it is definitely worth checking out. Also of note is that Santa Fe doesn't really have much in the way of large truck stops, restaurants, or hotels off the interstate exits, so you'll have to go into town for those things. As we leave the capital city, you'll now see the fabulous Las Vegas signed overhead. Aha, you didn't know that Interstate 25 takes you to Las Vegas. Well, it's not quite the Vegas that you were thinking of. This is actually the first Las Vegas, being established around 70 years or so before that one in Nevada. Between Santa Fe and Las Vegas, I-25 takes a turn to the east in order to avoid difficult mountain terrain. Make no mistake, we are driving through mountains, but through the Glorieta Pass with an elevation of over 7,400 feet. Once you arrive in Las Vegas, there's a Love's and Maverick gas station off the exit, and man, these places are usually slammed with travelers, so you might be waiting a bit to fill up your tank. Las Vegas used to be separated into an east and west, but later combined. Its downtown area also features some of the classic Santa Fe architecture. After Las Vegas is Raton, and between here and there you won't see much of anything. Mountains are still visible to the west as always. Try to stay awake. As we close in on Raton, this part of New Mexico starts to look like the plains of Kansas in some respects, but with a few mountains on the horizon. Raton is the last stop for amenities in New Mexico, and US 87 joins here. Now, if you recall, this would be one of the possible routes of I-27 that we discussed a few weeks back. After this small town, we are in for a visual treat as we begin climbing in elevation towards the Raton Pass. If you come through here in the colder months, you can see some nice snowy peaks in the distance. Don't worry though, you'll get plenty more of those in the next state. Near the top of the pass, we exit New Mexico, and it is on to our next state, Colorado. Colorado State, Los Animas County is what the sign says. The speed limit is 65 and snow-capped mountains are immediately visible. Oh yeah, this is definitely Colorado. Truckers be alert as we are now descending in elevation. At the scenic overlook is where you'll find the colorful Colorado sign that you probably were looking for. After coming down from the pass, we are in the city of Trinidad. And there's a pretty sweet Colorado Centennial design on this overpass welcoming you into the state. Interstate 25 is the main character in Colorado, as the vast majority of the state's population lives along this route. Trinidad has plenty of travel amenities if you miss them in Raton. In Colorado, both US 85 and US 87 are concurrent right now with I-25, but neither are signed down here. We do have a signed concurrency with US 160 though. Our city after Trinidad is Pueblo, and in Colorado, I-25 travels near the base of the mountains, so you can see some beautiful peaks whenever you decide to turn your head to the left. And to the right, you can see West Kansas, the Colorado Plains. Before getting to Pueblo, there's an interesting place called Colorado City. It's not incorporated and is a special type of district in Colorado. But for whatever reason, you can see where it has a street network laid out for what appears to be for single-family homes, but none have yet to be constructed, apparently. It kind of reminds me of the Lehigh Acres area of Florida. I guess Denver hasn't gotten quite expensive enough for people to start moving this far south. On I-25 in Colorado, you'll see lots of keep right except to pass signs. And for the most part, I'd say most drivers did follow this rule. I only caught a few of those white vans hogging the left lane when I came through here. Welcome to Pueblo, the greatest city in all of Colorado, is what I hear. The Colorado State Fair occurs down here, and the downtown is not too bad. Funny thing about Pueblo is that I actually hear many say this is actually one of the worst cities in the state to live in. Now, it did look pretty decent when I went through there, but maybe I need to get down there and spend a few more days. Maybe we could do a state of infrastructure video on good old Pueblo. In Pueblo, I-25 becomes an urban freeway running next to the city center. US 50 joins through the main city and exits to the west north of town to where you can reach Pueblo West, a suburban area that has become popular for those escaping more expensive parts of Colorado. US 50 can also get you to Canyon City, where there's a pretty cool train ride to check out, or to Florence, where you can find the famous Supermax prison. As we head north, Colorado Springs is now the control city. Between Pueblo and Colorado Springs, we are still at 4 lanes, 75 miles per hour, and the scenery that you should be used to by now. Mountains west, plains east. At exit 116 is County Line Road as we enter El Paso County, the now most populated county in all of Colorado and the home of Colorado Springs. Speaking of which, current projections forecast that Colorado Springs will eventually catch and surpass Denver in population in 2050, mostly thanks to Denver being landlocked by annexation laws passed back in the 70s to get around school integration. However, the Denver metro area will easily remain the largest in the state. At exit 122 is Pikes Peak International Raceway. Now I remember this place from back in the day when I used to play those Gran Turismo games on the PlayStation. The development begins as we approach Fountain, and you'll see signage for US 85, the highway that has been concurrent with us this whole time, but until now was unsigned. US 85 runs through downtown Fountain and then into Colorado Springs. And then finally, we are in Colorado Springs itself. In Colorado Springs, the mountains feel closer than ever, as the iconic Pikes Peak and other mountains are very visible to the left. The locals like to refer to it as the Springs. I-25 opens up to 6 lanes in the Springs, and Nevada Avenue will take you into the heart of the city. Colorado Springs is also notable for Cheyenne Mountain, the home of NORAD, and Fort Carson. It might be the best military town in the country behind San Diego. I-25 has some pretty nice sized shoulders for an urban freeway here in the Springs. And also in Colorado Springs, the traffic isn't too bad, as long as you don't come through here during peak hours. At Bijou Street, you can get into downtown Colorado Springs or head to check out Old Colorado City to the west, the former capital of the old Colorado Territory for 5 days before it was moved to Golden. After reconnecting with Nevada Avenue, we pass by the Air Force Academy. Development continues even after exiting Colorado Springs, and we have a 6-lane plus 1 express lane configuration through here. Like many other states, Colorado is all in on express lanes. The speed limit is up to 75 miles per hour, and eventually this configuration changes to the 4-lane plus 1 express lane, which does work for now, but once an area grows, I guarantee this configuration will become a disaster. Just look at Interstate 820 in Fort Worth, for example. Also, just north of Monument, you can find that the large wildlife crossing that has recently been completed and is now the largest wildlife crossing in the United States. In the Douglas County seat of Castle Rock, you can see said rock from the interstate. The express lane becomes a general purpose lane, and as we begin approaching the Denver area, the highway opens up to 8 lanes. We enter the Denver area in suburbia, with the city of Lone Tree, which contains the Park Meadows Mall, the largest in the state. We have a major interchange with Colorado 470 and E470. Now you're probably wondering what in the world is going on here. Well, when the federal government was paying for 90% of the interstate construction costs, Colorado lacked the foresight to build the full Denver Beltway, so later on it was built privately as a toll road in various parts, with the northwestern part still in limbo. We discussed that on an earlier video here. As a result, Denver now suffers from what Austin, Texas and Toronto, Ontario do, with the direct route being free and the bypass being tolled, which leads to more people choosing to simply drive through the middle of the city. The Beltway is signed for Grand Junction to the west and the major metropolis of Lyman to the east. Many in the southern suburbs do use it to get to the airport though. Once we get inside the Beltway, we come on the most developed portion of Interstate 25. I-25 opens up to 10 lanes as we enter Centennial, and you'll notice a few large pedestrian bridges over the interstate, though I've rarely actually seen anyone walking on them. They do look pretty nice though. You'll also start to see some larger buildings, as the southern suburbs have quite a bit of office activity on their own. Signage for I-225 appears, and to the right is the Denver city limit sign showing its elevation at 5,280 feet. It truly is the mile-high city. I-225 will take you to the giant suburb of Aurora and the Denver airport. Now, this section in Colorado was rebuilt in 2001 in what was known as the Transportation Expansion, or T-REX project. A $1.67 billion project that involved widening both I-25 and I-225, over 19 miles of new light rail, and rebuilding 8 interchanges. The project costs included $795 million for the highways, $879 million for the light rail construction, and $91 million for new light rail vehicles. How well has it worked out? Well, you'd have to ask the people who lived in Colorado before 2001 to see if they liked the way it was better. After I-225 is when the real fun begins. Despite having 8 to 10 lanes, I-25 can just randomly get congested at any time of day in this area. Yes, it can be 10 a.m., 2 p.m., whatever, and you just might find some congestion on I-25. It almost reminds me of a mini Atlanta type of experience, despite Atlanta being over twice as large as the Denver metro area. We have more of those nice pedestrian bridges as we get closer to downtown, and you'll also notice that the overpasses now have the street names on them. Now, I do like this design here in Denver. After Colorado Boulevard, I-25 takes a turn to the west, and you get a full panoramic view of the Rocky Mountains. It's quite spectacular, and I must say that it feels good to be able to go out and see such beauty on a regular basis. If you happen to see someone driving with no tags, don't worry. It's par for the course here in Denver. Just don't get hit by them, because they probably don't have any insurance. At Downing, you can exit to check out the large Washington Park. At Broadway and Lincoln, you can find some nice dining and nightlife. And then US 85 rejoins us at Santa Fe Drive. Now, this is the beginning of what I like to call the curve of chaos here in Denver. Now, if you were lucky enough to avoid any congestion so far, you will experience it in this section, unless it's late at night or Sunday. We have US 85, US 6, Spear Boulevard, and then Colfax Avenue, all in quick succession. With the lane switching and merging in this area combined with the density, it all just becomes a recipe for disaster. While you're sitting in traffic, you do get a nice view of Mile High Stadium, and should you take the Colfax exit, you get a wonderful view of the Denver skyline, along with a wonderful taste of the culture of Denver that can be found along Colfax. Now, if I knew how nice it looked from the west, I might have gotten a place on this side of town instead. You got to give Colorado credit for all these pedestrian bridges over I-25. In this area, they connect downtown with the Highlands neighborhood, and after clearing downtown, we finally approach Interstate 70 itself, which is signed for Grand Junction and Lyman once again. Auxiliary lanes are provided, as similarly to Albuquerque, Colorado redesigned this interchange after the original proved inadequate to handle modern traffic demands. I typically don't find this one too problematic unless you're trying to get onto I-25 south from I-70 westbound. Not long afterwards, we have back-to-back interchanges. First, there's I-76, which will take you to I-70 and Grand Junction to the west, or Fort Morgan to the east. It also continues into Nebraska if you want to experience the good life. Then there is I-270 and US 36, which was the former Denver Boulder Turnpike, a case where tolls were actually removed after the roadway was paid for. There's no direct ramp to access I-270 from this direction, as you could have just used I-76 to get there. But the left 3 lanes will exit to Boulder, where you can find UC Boulder and catch a football game with Coach Prime. Heading north, we are now on the way to Fort Collins. In the northern suburbs, we have a 3+1 general purpose and express lanes configuration. And eventually we meet E470 again. And this time there's another toll road known as the Northwest Parkway to the west. The express lane drops in Weld County and is a standard 6-lane freeway. With the lack of development out here, you can turn left and get a clear, unobstructed view of the mountains. Eventually we lose the 3rd lane and you can see where Colorado is working on express lanes for the area. In Johnstown, you can find the state's only Buc-ee's gas station, which surprisingly I have not yet visited. I know, I need to get on that. The express lane out here has the tolls temporarily waived, but for whatever reason, most people don't use it. So feel free to hop on and speed ahead of the slower drivers. Exit 257 gets you to Greeley or Loveland, and then is on to Fort Collins. US 34 also runs further west to the Rocky Mountain National Park. Your exit for Fort Collins is exit 269, which is also where the 3rd lane drops, and we are back to our standard 4-lane rural freeway. North of Fort Collins, the terrain becomes pretty flat, but the mountains, of course, are still visible to your left. So let's get on to our final state on this journey, Wyoming. Just before crossing the state line, there is a pull-off area where you can see the Wyoming welcome sign and take some pictures if you desire. We enter the state in Laramie County, home of Cheyenne. First, you got your Flying J truck stop and an I-25 business loop. Then we meet Interstate 80. Interstate 80 is signed for Rock Springs to the west and Sidney to the east, strangely skipping over the college town of Larimer. In Wyoming, you only get 4 lanes, but that's truly all you need, as this is the emptiest state in America. Francis Air Force Base to the west, and Cheyenne is to the east. You can see some newer residential developments from the interstate out here, as people have moved to Wyoming for a lower cost of living. Cheyenne is actually not that far of a commute to get down into Denver and the more developed parts of Colorado. US 85 comes back home for a bit after leaving us back in Denver, but then it leaves us again a little north of the city. Now US 87 is still concurrent. Now at this point, I hope you were well rested, because our next major town is Casper, and the story between here and there is depressing scenery and wind. Lots and lots of wind. They might need to rename Wyoming the Windy State. If you come through here in the winter, the winds will be even more intense, and signage warning truckers will be overhead.
Winds have become a nuisance today as travelers drive on I-25. Winds have gusted as high as 90 miles per hour.
Eastern Wyoming doesn't look anything like what you saw in Yellowstone. After Douglas, we take a turn to the west towards Casper. In Casper, I-25 becomes an urban freeway for a short while, and when I was there, it appeared to be undergoing construction. Casper itself had a decent looking downtown, but all I could hear was the wind while driving through. You can tell the I-25 in Wyoming is probably one of those places where there would never have been a freeway if the federal government didn't pay for it. After well over an hour of more wind, more bland, and more blah, we approach Buffalo, the end of the line for I-25. At exit 300, you see the sign for Gillette for I-90 to the east and Sheridan for I-90 to the west. US 87 is also finally acknowledged as it continues with I-90 rather than ending with I-25. Now, I didn't see any end sign for I-25, but it merges in with I-90 from the left. And should you decide to continue along I-90, you can check out Sheridan and eventually those big skies in Montana. But for I-25, this is the end of the line. What a run. All right, guys, that is Interstate 25 and everything you can expect when you are out here driving along and navigating this major mountain interstate. Let me know what you guys think about this highway, especially if you live along the Front Range or in New Mexico and use it often. Me personally, it's probably my most used interstate now, as it's the closest one to me. And even though sometimes the traffic can be horrific, it's always nice to appreciate those mountain views that you get to see when on this interstate. Now, as always, thanks for watching the video, and I will see you guys next time.